Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to come before the committee, because I'm not a member of this committee, and I won't delay you. I know it's been a long evening and everything else, and I thank you all for your presentations, but I suppose I was a little bit taken aback a little bit earlier on, Fergal, with what you had said. It's the difference of opinion. Yeah. What we see in the market sees is very different to what the small farmers see. And we talked then about the 80,000 farm families. And what I felt throughout the whole conversation this afternoon is that I felt the commentary from your good selves was more corporate-based than family farm-based. I actually felt really myself from your whole presentation, you were more on the side of corporate governance than you were on the side of the small family farm. And you know, with your role as CCPC, I would have thought you would be far more balanced and fair in your whole presentation. Like, that's not what I picked up here this evening. I actually picked up you were there for the corporate side, definitely. I'm very confused as to the fact that there's been no prosecution whatsoever in this sector, and I'm going to ask you one or two questions in relation to why there has been no prosecution. Like, why has the CCPC permitted producer groups operating outside the producer organisation legislation to go unchecked, and why blind-eyed positions taken and what else has been ignored by the CCPC? Perhaps, Brian, you'll answer that in a moment. And why are the factory-owned and controlled feedlots at an arm's length relationship permitted when international opinion is that such feedlots are considered to be market influencing in their nature? And also, can you also tell me in relation to price signalling, is it fine, is it acceptable to the CCPC? And have you had a look at, or have you done analysis of the MII as a facilitator for price arranging? Because these are the questions that have predominantly drove farmers to the point of frustration that led to the pickets last August, that continued the frustration that brought us nearly to an industry to a complete halt because of the lack of intervention that would have been felt by the CCPC. And in your final remarks there a few minutes ago, you said, yes, we could do with powers, regulatory powers, sectorial regulation, mediation. You actually had the opportunity of mediation on the first round of talks and on the second round of talks, where Deputy Fitzmaurice talked there about the base price. You had every opportunity to come before the various farming organisations and discuss base price in a mediation role, but you chose not to. And to think that you have been in operation and you have never once had one prosecution, all the while you have facilitated a beast to grow out of control that is choking the rural Irish small farmer. It is unbelievable. It's absolutely shocking to think that you can actually think that farmers can work at 50 cents below the cost of production and survive and live. That's not right. That's not industry. What you're doing is pushing them out. So perhaps you could answer some of those. And then I have one question in relation to your chair, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Ms Goggin.
I would be very disappointed indeed if the reputation or the image was out there that we were on the side of the corporates rather than on the side of the family farm. We are on the side of consumers. That's our job. That's the job that the Oireachtas gave us. We are not on the side of one particular side or another in an industrial sector. Our mission and the job that we've been given is to promote competition and to protect consumers. So our approach to every single issue that comes before us is going to be what is the best outcome for consumers. It is no part of our job to mediate between competing industry structures. It's no part of our job to get into the beef process talks and say, you should have this money or you should have that money, as my colleagues have said. We are not a price regulator. And if that's what you want, and I'm not at all disputing that may be what is needed, it is no part of a competition authority's role, it's no part of a consumer protection organisation's role. It's getting squarely into the area of sectoral regulation. I mean, there is no competition authority in the world who's going to get involved in talks and deciding what the price should be as between two different sets of businesses. Our role is to promote competition and to protect consumers, and it's the welfare of consumers that's going to be at the forefront of our mind throughout this. So we're not pro one side or the other in any of these issues. The side that we are on is the side of consumers. So I'll ask my colleague perhaps to talk about the issues of the producer. POs.
One moment, and I know you have been very clear there, Ms. Goggin, that it's not part of your job to mediate. Unfortunately, there was a perception out there during the summer months that it was part of your job, and and that was the main reason why I wanted to have you in before us today, to actually spell it out exactly what your role is, what more powers do you need so that you can be more involved. And I think what has come out of our talks today is in relation to the sector regulator seems to be the way forward, because obviously you're an independent statutory body under the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, and obviously there's a perception out there that your remit goes further than what it actually does.
I think that's very much the case, Chairperson, and if I could say so, I mean, we're here talking a lot about beef, but I mean, if you look at some of the other areas that we've discussed today where our role extends, insurance, I mean, could you imagine us getting into the middle of the insurance industry and having to mediate between people as to who should get more money out of a particular transaction? I mean, it's just not where we are. Competition law and consumer protection law are there, as I was saying earlier, as a kind of a baseline across the way in which industry operates, in the same way that people have to comply with the revenue law, and the same way that they have to comply with environmental legislation and so on. But it's not a means of solving these problems. And I agree. I think it's a pity that this perception has arisen that it is both more of a problem, I would say, and more of a solution than it actually is in this sector.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of producer organisations, and you can correct me if I misunderstood the question, but producer organisation needs to comply with the requirements, the criteria set out, and agriculture will oversee that. In terms of other organisations,
just if you don't mind there, yeah. I was very specific in my question. It was that the CCPC permitted producer groups operating outside of the producers' organisation legislation. Like, we do know that they are in operation in the country.
So we haven't permitted a particular producer group.
Yes.
We're not aware of a producer group acting as a producer organisation.
You're not.
No. I mean, so when in terms of what's happened recently, so the beef plan movement did.
It's nothing to do with
okay.
beef plan. It's nothing to do with beef plan.
So fair enough. So
right.
We haven't engaged with other parties in terms of them acting as a producer organisation or anything like that. We're not aware of it.
Did you happen to have turned a blind eye to a producer organisation working?
No, we do not turn blind eyes. We don't for anyone. So we write to Bank of Ireland, as we have done, highlighting the concerns we have for them, and we'll write to the beef plan movement, and we've written to others letters just to work towards achieving compliance in the first instance. And in terms of corporate, I will reiterate, I mean, a huge amount of our resources currently in a ticketing investigation and in the insurance investigation. These are big corporate players. This is a huge element of what we do, and so we are not scared of anyone, no matter what size they are. Where there is the evidence, we'll go after them. In terms of the insurance one, it is about price signalling. So if there's price signalling, it is a concern. And again, when we engage with parties, we do have these discussions, and I know it can be quite technical in terms of competition law and the issues around it, but the more we have those discussions, the more we learn, and the more we can highlight, what would and wouldn't fall in terms of competition law.
What about the feedlots then? So
the feedlots is an area where we have received complaints. So we've received, as I said, over 170 complaints, and we're working through those, and we will look at them. So that will go through a process, and we will look at it.
And would they be feeding into the price signalling or the management of the price, if you know what I mean? Because they're able to bring in from the feedlots to control the kill in relation to the beef industry.
The idea that a market, and I speak generically, a market will have a player who operates what we call vertically, so upstream and downstream, in terms of the input and the actual production. That's not unusual in itself in a market generically. Whether there's specific issues in relation to this complaint, we'll have to look into it and we'll have to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. And final question, can I ask about Europe, if you don't mind, Chair?
Okay.
All right. European pricing, I'd be interested to hear your opinions in relation to European pricing and the market pressures that would be possibly influencing price right across dominant players across Europe in relation to beef. Have you come across that yourselves?
I mean, the market does certainly have a European dimension. We do engage on a European level. There's a lot of interest in terms of the UTPs issue, which is obviously a European piece of legislation, and the issues within the industry. We haven't particularly come across issues in terms of the idea of cross-border cartels or investigations of that nature. But we do continue to discuss with Europe all the issues within the market. We do attend Europe quite regularly. It's a very useful source of information for us. And if there was to be concerns at that European level, we would engage with the Commission on them.
Just, Deputy, if I might add one point. I mean, I absolutely accept that there's disappointment about the role of the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. I understand the strength of feeling, but just from somebody who does hold a senior role in this organisation, I would be very disappointed if anybody didn't see us as not being constructive. We have, over the last number of years, particularly with the incoming transposition of the Unfair Trading Practices Directive, gone a little bit beyond our role, I would suggest, in terms of suggesting measures that could address issues in this sector, and we will continue to do that because we do see the difficulties that are in this area. But I suppose our frustration is that we're constantly seeing that the measures that are being put up to solve the issues, in our professional opinion, won't do so. And that's where we're coming back to this idea of, if you want to address buyer power, if you want to address sustainability, then a much broader perspective needs to be taken than our current grocery regulations or competition policy. And that's where it comes back to the idea of the sectoral regulator, which could be a way forward, along with the supports that are already there from the Department of Agriculture, from Teagasc, from Board Bia, from the Food Safety Authority. There are a lot of mechanisms there, but from our point of view, there are certainly market intervention mechanisms and instruments that are not there at present, which we believe could be.